You know, it's strange how you can live in the same rhythm for so long that it feels unshakable. For me, mornings were always the same. The sound of our old kettle hissing, the faint smell of coffee drifting into the hallway, and those two chipped mugs we refused to replace because, well, they'd been ours since the first year of our marriage. She'd always take hers with just a little milk, no sugar. I took mine black. That was one of those small differences we used to joke about. You're bitter, I'm sweet, she'd say, smirking over the rim of her mug. Life wasn't exciting, but it was stable, predictable in a comforting way. We had our tiny rituals, her humming while she watered the plants, me scrolling half awake through emails at the kitchen table. Some days we'd barely talk before she left for work, but there was never any tension, just life rolling forward, one quiet morning after another. She'd been talking about needing to recharge for a while. Nothing dramatic, it's just little mentions here and there about how work was wearing her down, how she needed a reset button. I figured everyone needs that once in a while, so when she told me she was going on a wellness trip with some friends, I didn't think twice. I remember actually feeling relieved for her, like, good, you deserve this. Go to the yoga and the spa thing and whatever else people do on those retreats. She said it'd be a week, somewhere with hot springs, and no phone signal, which honestly sounded like heaven. I even helped her pack, folding her favorite sweaters, rolling the jeans so they'd fit better in the suitcase. She teased me about my dad-style packing skills. We laughed. The day she left, the morning light was cutting through the blinds in that soft, golden way. I stood by the doorway, watching her zip up her suitcase one last time. She looked happy, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in a while. She kissed me on the cheek, told me to try not to burn the kitchen down while she was gone. Told her not to come back with a pet goat or anything weird. Then she was gone. Just like that. The apartment felt a little too quiet. I figured that's normal when you're used to someone's voice filling the space. The inheritance from my father. It wasn't something I thought about much day to day. It sat quietly in its own account, like a safety net I hoped I'd never have to use. My father had worked his whole life for that money. When he passed, it felt like the last piece of him I could protect. I never imagined it would be the thing to tear my life apart back then. It was just another calm morning. If I'd known what was coming, I might have hugged her a little tighter. Or maybe I wouldn't have helped her pack at all. The first 2 days she was gone felt normal. Quiet, sure, but normal. I'd text her in the evenings. She'd reply an hour later with a short update. Spa was great. Going for a hike tomorrow. Miss you. But by day 3, the responses started thinning out. I sent her a picture of our cat sitting in her suitcase, like he was waiting for her to come back. No reply. A few hours later, I texted, "Everything okay over there?" She finally replied, "Sorry, bad signal. We're up in the hills." I believed her. It made sense. Some of those retreat places barely have Wi-Fi. Still, there was this tiny itch in my mind that wouldn't go away that night. I'm lying in bed, the apartment dark, except for the blue glow of my phone screen. I scroll through my feed without thinking, half asleep, till I see it. It's a picture someone else posted. It's not her. It's her, yes, but not with the friends she told me about. She's sitting at an outdoor cafe, laughing at something, her hair caught in the wind. And right next to her, leaning in close like they belong there, is a man I don't recognize. I stared at that photo longer than I should have, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe he's just a friend of a friend. Maybe he's a tour guide. Or hell, maybe it's just bad camera timing. I didn't want to be that person, the suspicious, jealous spouse. That's not who I am. But then, in the quiet of that room, my mind started pulling on threads. I thought about the way she'd been smiling when she left. Like she already had one foot out the door, and then, out of nowhere, I remembered something my father said to me before he passed. We were sitting on the porch, sharing one of those rare summer evenings when the world felt slow and kind. He'd looked at me and said, "Son, take care of what's yours. Don't assume someone else will." At the time, I thought he meant the house, or maybe the family name. It didn't matter. Back then, it was just another fatherly warning you file away and forget. I put my phone down. Told myself to stop spiraling. The coffee I'd made earlier sat on the table, untouched, cold. I carried it to the sink, poured it out, and stood there a moment longer than I should have, just listening to the sound of the drain. I told myself I was imagining things, and for the rest of that night, I almost believed it. It was one of those slow afternoons where the day just drags, the kind where the most exciting thing on your to-do list is maybe doing the dishes. I just sat down with a sandwich when my phone lit up. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Probably a scam, I thought. Some extended car warranty nonsense. But something in me, maybe boredom, maybe habit, made me swipe the screen. Mr. Khan? The voice was calm, clipped, professional. Yes. This is Angela from West Point Bank. I just need to confirm some recent transactions from your inheritance account. For a second, I froze my inheritance account, the one I barely touched. The one I only logged into once in a while just to see that the numbers were still there. I think you might have the wrong person, I said, half laughing, half annoyed. I haven't made any transactions. There was a pause on the other end, just long enough for my stomach to tighten. I understand, she said slowly. But we have a flagged transfer we need to verify. Her tone wasn't casual. Was careful. Like she was trying not to drop bad news too fast. She read out the date. 2 days ago, the amount large enough to make my pulse spike, and then the name it was transferred to. Her name, my wife's. For a second, it's the noise around. Me. The faint hum of the fridge. The muffled city traffic outside just went quiet, like someone had pulled the plug on the world. I gripped the phone so hard my hand actually shook. Can you repeat that? I asked, though I'd heard her perfectly the first time. She did. Word for word. I didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at the wall. My sandwich sitting untouched in front of me, Angela kept talking something about confirming authorization. Fraud checks, the usual bank spiel. But I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was racing back to the moment my father and I sat in the bank years ago signing the papers. His hand was steady. Mine wasn't. This is for later, he'd told me, for when you really need it. Now, it was gone. Or at least, a big piece of it. I ended the call politely, not because I wanted to be polite, but because I didn't know what else to do. I just hung up and stared at my phone. The city outside went back to making noise, but it all sounded far away, like I was underwater. She'd done it. While she was off recharging in hot springs or whatever, she'd reached into the one thing I thought was untouchable and made it hers. And the worst part, didn't even know why. I sat there for I don't even know how long. Phone in. One hand, Bank's voice still echoing in my head. At first it was just noise, random thoughts colliding. But then my mind started rewinding, like someone had pressed play on every little conversation we'd had in the last month. Only this time, the background was different. The colors darker. I remembered a night in the kitchen, maybe 2 weeks before. She left. She was pouring herself a glass of water, and out of nowhere she asked, "Hey, do you still keep that inheritance money in the same account? You should give me the details, just in case something ever happens to you." I laughed at the time, planning to bump me off, I'd said. She smirked, rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. I just think it's smart for both of us to know where things are." It felt harmless, responsible even. I gave her the basic info, not the password, just enough that she could find it if needed. Now, I realized that was the first move. The timing clicked. The transfer happened 2 days ago, the same day she posted that photo from the hot springs. Steam curling up behind her, hair damp, smiling like she was weightless. I remember thinking, at the time, she looked so happy. Turns out she had good reason. She was in the middle of taking a piece of my father's legacy and sliding it neatly into her own name. I pulled up her Instagram, scrolled through the posts again. There it was, the hot springs photo, posted at 3:14 p.m., the bank records. Showed the transfer request at 3:21 p.m., 7 minutes. 7 minutes between her smiling for the camera and signing. Way a part of my life. It didn't feel like a mistake. It didn't feel like something she'd explain away with a tearful apology. It felt deliberate. And in that moment, the shock I'd been swimming in started to solidify into something heavier. Betrayal doesn't hit all at once. It seeps in. First, it's just a crack in the glass. Then you notice the spiderweb lines spreading. Eventually, you realize the whole thing's shattered. And you've been holding the pieces in your bare hands the whole time. I sat there staring at overlapping images in my head, bank statements printed in sterile black and white, her photos, bright and full of life. Two completely different realities. One she was living in. One she'd left me to drown in, and the worst part, she was still out there, smiling for more pictures. The first call went to voicemail. So did the second. By the third, I wasn't even expecting her to pick up. I typed out a message. Call me. Urgent. Waited. Nothing. Half an hour later, my phone buzzed. I snatched it up so fast I almost dropped it. But it wasn't a call, just a text. 8 words. We need to talk when I'm back. I read it over and over. Like maybe the meaning would change if I stared long enough. It didn't. It was short-clipped. And so, controlled. No apology. No confusion. Just a statement, as if I was the one who needed to be patient for her. That's when my head started spinning with a dozen versions of the same scene. Our confrontation in one. I'm shouting, slamming my hand on the table, demanding answers in. Another, I'm completely silent, just watching her squirm until she fills the air with excuses. In yet another, she's crying, saying it's not what I think, that she borrowed it, that she'd planned to tell me. The problem was, none of these versions ended with me feeling better. They all ended with the same hollow weight in my chest. Somewhere, in the middle of all that mental chaos, I slipped into a memory, me and my father, years ago, sitting in the bank's office. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and coffee gone cold. He was wearing his favorite navy blazer, the one with the loose button I kept meaning to fix for him. The banker slid the papers across the desk, explaining terms I barely listened to because I was too busy looking at my father's face. He was calm, steady, like he'd thought through this moment 1,000 times when I signed.
Nice.
He put a hand on my shoulder and said, "This isn't just money. It's time I saved for you. Don't waste it. Don't let anyone take it." Back then, I smiled and said I wouldn't. Back then, I believed I was the only one who ever could. Now I was pacing my empty living room, his phone face down on the table like it might bite me. Every creak of the floorboards felt louder. Every shadow seemed sharper, and she was still out there in some resort town, probably sipping tea with that man from the photo, while I rehearsed conversations we might never even have. She still hadn't come back. It was 2 days before her supposed return when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in a while. Sana. We weren't especially close, more like friends through her. It's the kind of person you only ever see at birthdays or the occasional dinner. Almost didn't answer. But curiosity, or maybe instinct, made me swipe. Her voice was careful, almost hesitant. "Hey, listen, I don't really know how to say this, but I think you should know something." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" She hesitated. Again, I could hear background noise. The muffled chatter of a cafe, the clink of cups. "I saw her," she finally said. While she was supposed to be at the retreat, she wasn't with a group. It was just her and this guy.
They were
in town together, walking close, laughing, like a couple. The words landed like a slow drop of ink in water, spreading, darkening everything. I didn't speak at first. I just let the silence sit there, heavy and unmovable. Sana's tone softened. "I'm sorry. I know it's not my business. I thought you'd want to know." I thanked her, or at least I think I did. My voice didn't sound like mine. When I hung up, I just sat there staring at the wall, feeling my own pulse in my throat. The photo I'd seen days ago, her at the cafe with that man, wasn't some random coincidence. It wasn't a friend of a friend or a tour guide. It was him. The same man she'd chosen to spend that wellness trip with. And suddenly, the transfer from my father's inheritance didn't feel like a standalone betrayal. It felt like part of a bigger picture. Like this trip had been a carefully planned beginning to whatever new life she thought she was stepping into. 1. Where my father's money would be the starting fund. In my mind, I could see them, the way Santa must have seen them. Side by side, easy in each other's company, not worried about who might notice. The image burned into me, sharper than anything my imagination had conjured. I didn't know what hurt more, that she'd taken the money, or that she'd taken herself somewhere I could never follow. The door opened like it always did, the faint click of the lock, soft groan of the hinges. But it felt heavier this time. She stepped inside with her suitcase rolling behind her, her hair still smelling faintly of some floral shampoo I didn't recognize. For a moment I just stood there in the hallway, watching her kick off her shoes like nothing had happened. I thought I'd be ready for this moment. I'd rehearsed it in my head over and over, the words I'd say, the tone I'd take, the exact way I'd look at her so she'd know I knew. But when it finally happened, the words got stuck somewhere between my chest and my mouth. The air between us felt thick, like it could snap if either of us moved too fast. I managed one sentence. "Why'd you take it?" She froze, just for a second, and then without even a hint of denial, she said it. "I needed it. To start over." The words were simple, soft, even. But they might as well have been shards of glass, each one cutting a little deeper as I stood there, realizing she hadn't come back to explain. She'd come back to end something. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. "Start over with who?" I asked. She didn't answer. Her fingers just tightened on the suitcase handle until her knuckles went white. Somewhere in the background, the fridge hummed. A car passed on the street outside. Ordinary sounds that didn't belong in a moment like this. Because nothing about this was ordinary anymore. I thought about my father. About the weight of his hand on my shoulder in that bank office. About the quiet pride he'd had in knowing he was leaving me something safe, something mine. And now, that safety was gone, not because of a stranger, because of the person I'd promised my life to. She finally spoke again, barely above a whisper. "You'll be fine." Laughed. The kind of laugh that has no humor in it, just disbelief and a hint of bitterness. Because she wasn't talking about my heart. She wasn't even talking about my life. She meant the money, the part I had left. As if losing a chunk of my father's legacy and watching her walk out with someone else was just something I'd get over. I didn't say another word. I just stepped aside and let her wheel that suitcase into the bedroom, because I realized something in that moment. Whatever I'd been holding on to wasn't there anymore. The days after she came home didn't feel real. I wasn't angry in the way I thought I'd be. I wasn't pacing, yelling, or throwing things. Instead, I went quiet. It was like stepping out of my own body and watching. From a distance, as someone else took over, that someone else didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't even ask for more answers. They just worked. I pulled the bank records first, every transaction, every timestamp, every digital signature. I highlighted the transfer, printed it twice, and slid it into a folder I didn't label. Next came the texts, scrolled back through weeks of conversations, screenshotting the little setups I hadn't recognized at the time, her asking about the account, her bad signal excuses. The days she'd gone silent, one by one, they became exhibits. Evidence. I dug out my father's old file box from the back of the closet. The smell of old paper hit me as I opened it, dry, a little dusty, the faint scent of the cedar chest it used to sit in. His handwriting was still there on the original bank forms, bold, steady. Mine sat next to it, younger, less certain. Kitchen table turned into a war room. Bank statements spread across the surface like a battlefield. Map.legal forms I barely understood sat in neat piles, waiting for signatures. A pen rolled from one side to the other, tapping against the wood every time I shifted the papers. I kept the blinds half closed. The light that did slip through cast long shadows across the pages, slicing the words into pieces. It felt fitting, because that's what my life felt like now. Cut up, rearranged, no longer whole. There was no rage in what I was doing, just precision, a numb kind of efficiency that felt more like cleaning up after a storm than fighting. One, I didn't think about her while I worked, not about where she was or who she was talking to. She was no longer the center of the picture. This was about me and about the one person who wasn't here to defend what he'd left me. By the third day, the folder was full, thick with proof, black and white, dates and numbers. Betrayal translated into something you could staple, and for the first time since the call from the bank, I felt ready for whatever came next. The first meeting with the lawyer was in a room that smelled faintly of coffee and carpet cleaner. He wore the kind of suit that made him look like he'd been doing this for decades. The kind of man who's seen enough ugly stories to stop reacting to them. He flipped through my folder, page by page, barely looking up. When he did, it wasn't to express outrage or sympathy. It was to ask, do you want to go after the money, or do you want to go after her? The truth was, I didn't know the difference anymore. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork, phone calls and signatures. She refused to speak to me directly. Everything came through her lawyer, cold typed words instead of the voice I'd once heard whisper in the dark. Friends started vanishing. Not in a dramatic door-slamming way, just slowly, quietly. Messages that used to get. Replies in minutes now sat unread for days. Invitations stopped coming. Some of them stayed in touch. But I could feel the awkward pauses in their voices, the careful way they avoided saying her name. People pick sides, whether they admit it or not. Every time I walked past the bank, I'd glance at the glass doors and feel my chest tighten. That account, my father's safety net for me, was now just a number that had been hacked apart. Even the amount I still had felt. Tainted. Court hearings were the worst. Sterile rooms, gray walls. The sound of papers being shuffled as if they were discussing the weather. Not my life. She'd sit across the table, hair neatly tied back, looking like someone who had already moved on. Not once did she look at me for more than a second. One afternoon, after a particularly drawn-out session, I stepped outside and the sky just opened up. Heavy rain, cold enough to sting. I stood there for a minute before walking home, soaked through, feeling like maybe the weather was doing me a favor, hiding the fact that I was breaking a little more every day. The inheritance had been my father's final gift. Now it was evidence in a legal fight, and I couldn't tell if I was angrier about the money or about the way she'd taken something sacred and turned it into another transaction. It didn't happen all at once. There was no single day when I woke up and thought, okay, I'm over it. It was more like pieces of me slowly finding their way back. A morning when the coffee actually tasted good again. An afternoon where I caught myself humming along to a song in a cafe without realizing it. Little things. Quiet things. The legal fight ended with less money than I'd hoped for, but more than she'd wanted me to have. I guess that's what they call a compromise to me. It just felt like the last page in a book I didn't want to read in the first place. When it was over, I took the remaining inheritance and moved it to a new account. Different bank. Different city branch. I didn't want to see the same glass doors or the same tellers who'd watched the whole mess from the sidelines. I also stopped checking her social media, not because I didn't care anymore, but because I finally accepted that knowing what she was doing wouldn't change what had already happened. The truth was, she'd been gone long before the trip. The money was just the last act. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about my dad. I wonder what he'd say if he knew how his gift had been handled. But then I remember something else he used to tell me. Back when I was too young to understand why it mattered, it's not the money that makes you rich. It's what you can live without. Maybe that's the real inheritance, not the numbers in an account, but the ability to survive the loss of them and still stand. One evening, I walked past a travel agency window. There was a poster for a hot springs resort, same one from her. Photos. I stood there for a moment, staring at it, waiting for the anger or the sting to come. It didn't. All I felt was distance. It's like looking at someone else's life. That's when I knew I'd closed the chapter. The book's still on my shelf. I'll always know it's there, but I'm not opening it again.